You are part of this family, Alejandro, so it's your duty to help us. Later I discovered that my father took out a loan of 20,000 euros in my name for my sister's vacation, and wasn't planning on paying it. I didn't stand idly by. My name is Alejandro Fernandez, I'm 28 years old, and I've worked hard to get where I am. Since graduating in business administration, I've strived to save every penny and build an independent life. I'm not rich, but I have stability, a good job at a consulting firm, and a quiet life in my apartment in Madrid. However, everything changed the day I received a call from the bank. Mr. Fernandez, we need to talk about the loan you recently applied for. I frowned. Loan? I haven't applied for any loan. There was an awkward silence on the line before the woman from the bank continued. We're referring to the one for 20,000 approved 2 months ago. We've noticed that the payments haven't been made, and we wanted to confirm if there's any problem. My heart started pounding. There must be a mistake, I said, feeling a chill run down my spine. I haven't applied for any credit. The loan is registered in your name, Mr. Fernandez, and the funds were transferred to an account linked to your last name. My stomach churned. I asked for details, and upon hearing them, I felt like I couldn't breathe. The account to which they had transferred the money belonged to my father. I hung up without saying goodbye and immediately called my mother. She answered in her usual sweet tone. Alejandro, son, I was just thinking of calling you. Mom, I said, my voice tense. Explain to me why there's a 20,000 loan in my name that's been transferred to Dad's account. The silence that followed confirmed what I suspected. Ale, son, she began in a tone that tried to sound conciliatory. It's because we needed it. Needed it? I repeated, feeling my blood boil. You took out a loan in my name without my consent? How could you do something like that? Son, don't get like that. My father intervened in his usual tone, as if nothing serious had happened. We've taken care of you your whole life, we've given you everything. And now we're just asking for a little help. I swallowed. A little help? I spat angrily. This isn't help. This is betrayal. My mother sighed. Son, we only took it because we knew you could handle it. You have a good job, you earn well. Besides, we used it to pay your Uncle Javier's debt, and to help your sister. I felt the world crumble beneath my feet. How? You know your sister Carolina has been having financial problems. My mother continued in a pleading voice. It's been a difficult year for her. And that's not my problem. I shouted. It's her responsibility, not mine. Alejandro, don't be selfish, my father said coldly. We're a family. You have stability. It's not like this is going to ruin you. I closed my eyes tightly, trying to contain my rage. I'm going to fix this, and believe me, you're not going to get away with it. I hung up the phone without listening to any more excuses. There was no turning back. They had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now I only had one option, to fight back. My hands trembled as I reviewed the information the bank had sent me. Everything was in order. My name, my account number, the loan amount, and my mother's signature. How was it possible? And then I remembered. It was a rainy night in Madrid. I was in the hospital waiting room, my heart pounding in my throat. My mother was crying beside me, her face buried in her hands. Alejandro, please son, it's Dad. They're going to operate on him, and we don't have the money. My father had suffered a serious heart attack. Although he had health insurance, the policy didn't cover part of the cost of the surgery, and the hospital demanded an immediate payment of 20,000 to proceed. I ran to the nearest bank, desperate to get the money, but when I applied for the loan, the answer hit me like a bucket of cold water. I'm sorry, Mr. Fernandez, but your credit history is still very recent. We would need more time to approve such an amount. I put a hand to my forehead, feeling like the world was collapsing around me. We couldn't wait. Every minute counted. I can make the request, my mother suddenly said. My profile is more solid, but we need you to sign an authorization so I can process it in your name. Ale, honey, it's just a paper. This way we can get the money quickly and save your father. I didn't think twice. I didn't have the head to read terms or conditions. I just wanted to save my father. I took the pen and signed. The operation was a success, my father recovered, and over time I forgot about that signature. I never canceled the authorization because I thought it didn't matter. Just in case, I told myself. I never imagined that just in case would be the weapon they would use against me. I gritted my teeth. I stood up abruptly, feeling like the air in my apartment was insufficient. Everything fit now. With that general authorization, my mother had been able to apply for the loan without me being present. And since the amount was only $20,000, the bank didn't require further verification. It was legal, and at the same time it was a stab in the back. My phone vibrated with a new message from my mother. "Ale, honey, please don't exaggerate. All this is for the good of the family. When you can, come home and we'll talk calmly." I took a deep breath. No, I wasn't going to let it go. I grabbed my jacket, my wallet, and my car keys. If they thought they could play with my money, they were about to find out how wrong they were. I drove through the city without paying attention to the traffic lights or the music playing on the radio. I only had one destination in mind, my parents' house. Rage burned in my chest, but I tried to control myself. I couldn't arrive shouting, "Not yet." When I parked in front of their house, I took a deep breath. I couldn't believe that after everything I had done to be independent, I had to come back here as if I were a child who needed explanations. I rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door with a nervous smile. "Alejandro, son, it's good that you came." I didn't reply. I walked directly to the living room where my father was sitting in his favorite armchair with the TV remote in his hand. He barely looked at me. "I told you not to exaggerate," he said with annoyance. "All this is a misunderstanding." I let out a dry laugh. A misunderstanding? Taking a loan in my name without my permission is a misunderstanding. "Don't shout," my mother intervened, trying to sound conciliatory. "Sit down, let's talk like a family." I crossed my arms. "I'm not going to sit down until you explain to me why you did this." My mother sighed and looked at my father, as if waiting for him to speak, but he just shrugged. "Look, Alejandro," she began in that sweet voice she always used when she wanted to manipulate me. "You have a good job stability, we needed a little help." "Help?" I spat the word with contempt. 20,000 euros is not a little help. "We were going to pay it," my father said without taking his eyes off the TV. "But then things got complicated." "Things got complicated?" I repeated incredulously. "Because you weren't even thinking of telling me anything?" My mother shifted uncomfortably. "We knew you were going to be angry. And why did you do it anyway?" She lowered her gaze. "It was for your sister." I felt a knot in my stomach. "For Carolina?" My mother nodded. "Your sister has been going through difficult times, Alejandro. They fired her from her job. She's in a lot of debt. And, well, she needed help." Rage mixed with disbelief. "So you decided that I should pay for her mistakes?" "She's your sister," my father replied coldly. "Family helps each other." I closed my eyes for a moment, trying not to lose my temper. "Where is Carolina?" My mother hesitated. "She's not here." "Where is she?" No one answered, and then I knew. "She's on a trip, right?" The silence of my parents was confirmation. I let out a bitter laugh. "I can't believe it." My mother tried to justify herself. "Son, she was very stressed, she needed a break." "A break?" My voice cracked with fury. "I'm the one who's going to have to pay this damn loan. And she's the one who needs a break?" My father put the remote on the table and looked at me with annoyance. "Enough, Alejandro, it's just money." I stared at him. "No, Dad, it's my money, my name, my future." "You complain as if you were poor," he snapped. "It's not going to kill you to pay this." I took a step toward him. "I'm not going to pay a single euro." "Well, we'll see how you fix it," he retorted. "Because the bank is going to come after you." "That's what we're going to discuss now," I said, pulling some papers out of my jacket. "I have options, and you're not going to like any of them." My mother's eyes widened in fear. "Ale, please no." "Mom, this is over." The silence that followed my words felt like an abyss between my parents and me. My mother looked at me with wet eyes, hoping I would soften my stance. My father, on the other hand, kept his hardened expression, his arms crossed, as if he were already tired of the discussion. "Alejandro, please," my mother begged. "This isn't something we can't solve together." I gritted my teeth and placed the papers on the table with a thud. "There's nothing to solve, Mom. The only thing I want is to understand at what point you thought this was okay." My father scoffed. "Don't be dramatic, it's just a loan." It's not the end of the world. My jaw tightened. Not for you, of course. You're not the ones who have to pay it. It was for your sister, my mother insisted, as if repeating it once more would justify what they had done. We knew it was going to bother you, but Ale, you have money, we don't. And you decided the best thing to do was take it without asking? Don't see it that way, my mother complained. It's just a favor. No, Mom, a favor is asked for, not stolen. She lowered her head, but my father remained firm. Look, kid, I don't have to feel guilty. We did what was necessary. I slammed the table with my open palm. What you did was selfish and dishonest. My mother sobbed, but my father barely reacted. And what do you plan to do? He said ironically. Report us. I remained silent for a moment. If I have to, I will. My mother put her hands to her mouth in horror. Don't talk like that, please. We are your family. Family. I repeated bitterly. A real family doesn't do this. My father leaned forward. Think carefully before you act. This can have consequences. I laughed incredulously. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you to think carefully before you act. His cold tone left me speechless. Of course, he wasn't going to give in. He wasn't used to having his decisions questioned. He had always been the one who had the last word in this house. But now the rules had changed. If you think I'm going to carry this loan, you're very wrong, I said firmly. I'm going to talk to the bank. They're not going to cancel it, my father replied. It's in your name. You signed the authorization. It's legal. I know, I said with a calmness I didn't feel. But that doesn't mean I can't do something about it. I took out my phone and dialed my lawyer's number. Alejandro, what's wrong? I need to see you as soon as possible, I said bluntly. It's urgent. My mother looked at me with panic. You can't do this, Alejandro. I ignored her. Tomorrow, first thing in your office. Okay. I hung up the call and put the phone back in my pocket. I'm going to find a way to undo this disaster. My mother burst into tears. Why are you doing this to us? She's your sister. No, Mom, you're the ones who did this to me. I turned and walked towards the door. Ale, please. Her voice was a broken threat of desperation. I paused for a moment but didn't look back. We'll talk when I fix this, I said before leaving and closing the door behind me. Hours later, I sat on the sofa in my apartment with a whiskey in my hand, staring into space. My phone vibrated several times with calls from my mother, but I ignored them all. Then a message from Carolina. Ale, Mom told me what happened. I didn't want it to be this way. I'm sorry. Fury boiled up inside me again. You knew they used my money, and you didn't say anything. 3 dots appeared on the screen, indicating she was typing, but the message never arrived. I tightened my grip on the glass. My phone rang again, but this time it wasn't my mother or Carolina. It was Miguel, my best friend. I hesitated to answer, but I did. Tell me, brother. What happened? Your mom called me crying. I closed my eyes wearily. The same old story, Miguel. My family deciding for me as if it didn't matter. What did they do now? I let out a sigh. They took out a loan in my name without telling me. $20,000 for Carolina to go on a luxury vacation. Miguel let out a whistle. Are you serious? Completely. There was a silence. What are you going to do? I took a sip of whiskey. I'm going to face this situation with all my strength. How? I smiled coldly. Tomorrow I have a meeting with my lawyer. Ale. Miguel sighed. Look, I know you're furious and you have the right to be, but are you sure you want to go this far? My jaw tightened. Did they think of me when they took my money? No. So don't ask me to have mercy, Miguel. Miguel was silent. Okay, he finally said. Do you need anything? I know you're here. I hung up the call and left the glass on the table. My apartment was completely silent. Only the ticking of the clock on the wall could be heard. There was no turning back. Tomorrow my road to justice would begin. Dawn found me awake, my mind burning with ideas and my heart pounding with contained fury. I hadn't slept a wink. I spent the night reviewing contracts, messages, and account statements, looking for a way to get rid of this problem without being left with the debt. If my family had decided to play dirty, I would play better. I took a quick shower and dressed in a dark gray suit. Today wasn't just a day of paperwork. Today was the first blow. The meeting with the lawyer, Miguel Ángel Salinas, received me in his office with his typical calm expression. He was a meticulous man with thin-rimmed glasses and an air of absolute professionalism. We had studied together at university, and if there was anyone who could help me out of this situation, it was him. "Tell me everything from the beginning," he said while pouring coffee into 2 cups. I related every detail. How my parents used the authorization I signed a year ago, how they took out the loan without telling me, and how they spent it on a luxury trip for Carolina. Miguel Ángel took notes in a leather notebook, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he took off his glasses and sighed. "You have a complicated problem, Al. Legally, the loan is in your name, and the bank has all the documents in order." I crossed my arms. "Tell me there's a way out of this." He smiled with a cunning glint in his eyes. "There are always ways." He pulled a document out of his briefcase. "The first thing we'll do is send a formal request to the bank for an audit of the application. We're going to allege that although the authorization was valid, I was never notified about the loan application. Does that work?" "Not always, but it generates pressure. If the bank thinks there's a possibility that the operation has flaws, they can open an internal investigation. And if we find a single error in the process, we can cancel the debt." I felt a slight relief. "And if the bank doesn't give in?" Miguel Ángel leaned forward. "Then we move on to the next step. Sue your parents for fraud." I remained silent. Sue them? Is that really necessary? It's the only legal way to completely detach yourself from the debt, if the bank refuses to cooperate. I took a deep breath. Was I really willing to go that far? I thought of my mother crying, my father defiantly challenging me. I thought of Carolina enjoying her vacation paid for with my money. "Do it," I finally said. Miguel Ángel nodded with satisfaction. "I knew you'd say that." The first move. I left the lawyer's office with my head held high. My next destination was the bank. I went directly to the branch manager, a middle-aged man with a blue tie and a tired expression. "I want an immediate review of the loan that appears in my account," I said firmly. The man looked at his screen and frowned. "Mr. Fernandez, the loan has already been approved and the funds have been used. We can't cancel it." "I want to see the documents I signed." The manager hesitated for a moment, but seeing my expression, he ordered his assistant to bring the files. When they handed me the folder, I opened it with tense hands. Everything seemed in order. My signature was there, but something caught my attention. "This email address is not mine," I said, pointing to a field in the application. The manager frowned. "It's the contact email registered for notifications." The email had my mother's last name. They had changed my information to ensure that I never received the loan notification. I leaned over the manager's desk. "This is a direct violation of the terms of the contract. You granted a loan without confirming the applicant's identity. If this reaches the media, you'll have a serious problem." The man swallowed. "I'm going to escalate this to the legal department, but I can't promise anything." I smiled coldly. "Do it. But I warn you that my lawyer is already preparing a lawsuit." I got up and left the bank without looking back. When I arrived at my parents' house that afternoon, my mother greeted me with a haggard face. "Alejandro, please, we need to talk." "I already spoke with the bank," I said bluntly. "I discovered that you changed my email address in the loan application." My mother turned pale. "Yes," I said, holding her gaze. "And this time with proof." I threw the folder with the documents on the table. "Do you know what this means? What you did wasn't just dishonest, it was illegal." My father took the papers with tense hands. "And what do you plan to do?" "I've already taken steps. If the bank doesn't cancel the debt, I'll sue them." My mother covered her mouth with her hands. "Oh my God." Carolina entered the room at that moment, tanned and with sunglasses on her head. "What's going on?" When she saw the papers on the table and the expression on my parents' faces, she understood everything. "Ale, you knew what they were doing and you let them?" She lowered her gaze. "I didn't think it was that serious." "Of course not," I laughed bitterly. "Because it wasn't you who had to pay." My father looked at me with hatred. "If you do this, you're going to be alone." I took a step towards the door. I'd rather be alone than continue to be surrounded by liars. I left without looking back, with the sound of my mother's sobs and my father's shouts echoing in my ears, but I didn't care. I had won the first battle. The bank didn't take long to respond. Just hours after I filed my formal complaint, I received an email from their legal department summoning me to an urgent meeting. I knew this moment would come. I put on a black suit, buttoned my jacket, and left my apartment with a dangerous calm. Today would be the day everything changed. The bank's verdict. The manager's office had a cold, professional air. A man with gray hair and thin glasses shook my hand. "Mr. Fernandez, we have reviewed your case." Crossing my arms, I looked at him without expression. "And what is the decision?" The man adjusted his glasses and picked up a folder with documents. "We have found irregularities in the loan approval process. By changing your email without your consent and without verbal confirmation from you, the bank has decided." My heart pounded. "To cancel the debt and void the loan." I did it, but I didn't smile. "What will happen to those responsible?" I asked in a neutral voice. The manager closed the folder. "As the transfer was made to your father's account, he will be the one who has to return the money." I suppressed a smile. "Perfect. Anything else?" "Yes, our legal team will contact your family to resolve this matter as soon as possible." I stood up and shook his hand. "I appreciate your cooperation." I left the bank without rushing. I clenched my fists, feeling the adrenaline coursing through me. Now the next blow. I didn't go to my parents' house. I summoned them to a luxurious restaurant where I knew they would feel out of place. I made them wait half an hour before appearing, enjoying the discomfort on their faces. My father frowned. My mother looked at the floor with tears in her eyes, and Carolina could barely hold my gaze. I sat down calmly and left my phone on the table. "Why did you make us come here?" my father asked irritably. I tilted my head, enjoying every second, because I wanted to see their faces when I told them that the bank had canceled the debt, and that now, Dad, you are solely responsible for paying the $20,000. My father's face lost all color. "What did you say? That the bank? They found irregularities and passed the bill to you?" My mother covered her mouth with one hand. "My God!" Carolina let out a choked gasp. Please no." But my father slammed his fist on the table. "You're ruining us. You're leaving us with no options." I laughed coldly. "No, you ruined yourselves." The silence that followed was suffocating. "We can't pay that amount," my mother whispered. "We're pensioners." I took my glass of water and drank slowly. "Then sell the car or the house or ask Carolina for money." "Don't ask me for anything." Carolina squirmed in her seat. I don't have that amount." I leaned towards her. "No, but you did have it for a luxury trip, right?" My sister remained silent. "Alejandro, please." My mother tried to plead. I raised a hand. "I don't want to hear excuses. The only thing I want to see is how you're going to face the consequences of your actions. You created this yourselves." My father stood up abruptly. "You're selfish." I stared at him. "And you deceived me in the worst way." We remained silent, measuring each other with our gazes. He was the first to look away. Without saying another word, I stood up, took my phone and headed for the exit. Before leaving, I launched one last jab. Good luck paying that debt. I left the restaurant, leaving behind a family that was no longer mine. A year later. "Ale, I know you don't want to talk to me, but Mom is unwell. She's been very depressed since everything happened. Dad had to sell the car, and now they barely leave the house. The debt destroyed us all. Please just tell me we're still family." Carolina's message remained unanswered. I turned off my phone and poured myself a glass of wine on the terrace of my new apartment in Barcelona. Tomorrow I had a flight to Japan. Life went on, but my relationship with my family never returned to what it was. Last part, responding to comments on Reddit. How could you not help your parents? They gave you food and shelter. If they had asked me, I would have considered it, but they didn't. They stole. But you signed the authorization. It's your fault. Yes, trusting them, I left it active because I thought they would only use it in a real emergency. My mistake was believing that my family would never betray me. If your sister was in crisis, why didn't you pay for her trip? Because she didn't have money. She was used to her ex-husband covering her luxuries. When she was left alone, she decided she deserved a break at my expense. Don't you think you were too hard on your family? No, they never apologized. They called me selfish. They said that family helps each other. Help. They used me. So I did the only thing I could do.